Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we are doing recording on this. This is basically going to be a great class today regarding the purchase contract. It is the standard RPA purchase agreement that we use here in California. This is an older document that I have, but I'm going to add elements about what we should be putting into our contracts today regarding COVID and the additional forms that we should be including. And it really all depends on what side of the transaction you are representing. If you are representing the buyer, then I would include certain clauses and addendums. But if I'm the seller side, I would be very cautious about allowing some of these coronavirus addendums that allow free extensions. So I just wanted to kind of understand what the meaning behind a lot of these forms that are newer and how do we apply them in our agreement. So today I'm not going to discuss every single detail unless you want me to pause on a certain section. Let me know, raise your hand or shout out your questions that you have. But I'm going to pretend that we are representing the buyer in this transaction because typically when we're writing these offers, we are representing the buyers, and it's important to show and write a professional, well-written offer that covers most of the bases particular to the transaction and the type of property. And so it's important to understand what you're dealing with. When I write an offer for a buyer, you put the buyer's name here. And, you know, a lot of people, sometimes they just write the husband's or wife's name and don't include their spouse. So optionally, a good strategy when you consult with your client, ask them who's going to be taking title or intending to take title, and you know, put both names on there. Or if you, some of the buyers out there, they say, oh, I'll put my name first, and if we get accepted, I'm going to add my wife into the transaction because it's easier to sign, blah, 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 blah. And so then you would write next to Big Bucks Bob, and or assignee. That will allow you to add your spouse or another party into the transaction during escrow. But you still need to get another addendum signed. So it's taking an extra step with whether you do it now or whether you do it later. So to me, I prefer being upfront instead of making changes through an addendum. Because, you know, or you can, it's for the lender perspective, they can't work on the transaction until the wife is added, for example, is added into the transaction. Then they can get them pre-approved. So you might waste 1 week if you're trying to get the contract changed through an addendum, and it's going to throw off your buyer's financing timelines if you try to add in the spouse mid-escrow. Okay, but if they do sign it quickly within 1 day, then you're not losing any time. But I can't control that, so that's something that you should keep in mind and talk about. Is the timing if you're gonna make changes to the buyer or the parties. The other mistake that I always see is sometimes we have clients. Half the transactions I see, the buyers are not individuals like this guy, Big Bucks Bob. Sometimes they are entities. And if they are an entity like a trust, like a power of attorney, a conservatorship or guardianship, maybe they are a LLC or a limited partnership. These are all entities, companies, and or authorized signers. So when you're dealing in those situations, you would write the entity name here, and then you would include a form called RCSD for your buyer to declare who is the authorized signer. I'm going to take you really quickly over to page 10 to show you that box. When a buyer is signing, you need to check this box right here if they are an entity. Include this form, RCSD, representative capacity signature disclosure. and ask for a copy of who is the authorized signers on behalf of that entity. If it's a trust, there is some sort of ABC Family Trust dated January 1st, 2010. But if there is a court appointed representative, you ask for that document from the court. If it's a probate, you're going to ask for the probate confirmation from the court or the attorney. Sometimes you might be dealing with a power of attorney. You have to ask for the document that has been notarized. So you want to confirm whoever is the entity, whoever is the authorized signers, because you could have a limited partnership and there's like 10 people on there, but maybe there's only 1 or 2 authorized signers. So you don't need all 10 signatures. You only need the authorized people who have the ability, the power to make decisions and sign documents on behalf of the entity. It's very easy to do. It's just a simple 1-page document, but most people are not getting that confirmation of the document, and you could be in big trouble if if you don't have an agreement on the sale and you don't have all authorized signers. And that would be especially important if you're representing the seller and you have a seller's entity, like let's say it's a husband and wife's family trust. And one of the spouses does not agree to the sale and the other spouse does, but you don't have both agreement on the sale, but yet you've entered into a contract without that authorized agreement. You're putting your client in a position of liability where you don't have full agreement to sell and you have a contract to sell. It's very conflicting. I don't want you to be in that position. So let me know. Someone said I froze. Can you guys hear me okay now? No one, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, right now it's good. But
Okay,
earlier
sorry.
you were froze.
Good. So that's what you just really want to do is double check whoever is authorized is signing your documents and as a contract, because it could be very problematic trying to back out of a sale when you don't have agreement to sell from the parties. This is where you would write your offer as the buyer's agent, Coldwell Banker Dynasty, and check the box that you're representing the buyer alone. And let's say Discount Realty Brokerage is representing the seller exclusively. I want to talk to you about the price and the timing. We've all known for many years that 30 days is pretty much the standard for how long it takes to close an escrow. And that's when everything is smooth and the borrower is simple and the property is very simple and straightforward, okay? But when you're in a transaction that is potentially problematic, then there's many potential problematic types of transactions. One might be if it's tenant occupied. One might be when the borrower is a stated income, self-employed, or a business owner, independent contractor. They might have a little bit of problems in their financing. The other reason why you might have a problematic is the property has potentially unpermitted areas, square footage, or discrepancies in that, or perhaps a lot of clouds on title. Another problematic area would be if you're dealing with FHA financing or a VA loan. That takes longer. If you're trying to do a city or government grant or a specific type of program available, then that would be another type of problem that you have to overcome. If the property is an HOA, and a lot of times these HOAs don't respond quickly to requests for documents, then you might want to consider adding more than 30 days to the transaction. Okay, it's up to you. Every property is case by case, but I would in this time frame now, I'm seeing a lot of lenders being unable to meet their deadlines. They're overwhelmed by a number of applicants and borrowers doing refinances. A lot of different mortgage activity has been pretty hot this summer in terms of activity-wise from buyers. And overall, lending guidelines have recently changed a little bit. So Every single, week, there could be a different type of condition that they're requesting. So if you were on the cautious side and or in a situation with a problem like I discussed, I would maybe add another 5 days, maybe another 7 days, 10 days to your transaction, just so that you're not pressured and being behind on the transaction. It really depends on the buyer's what type of source of their income. If they're W-2 in earners and it's easy, clean, they don't have a lot of debt or a lot of liability, other properties or other investments, I believe you'll be fine in 30 days. But it's those situations that I mentioned before. Also, if you have a city inspection that's required, like City of El Monte or Azusa or Pasadena, if you have those kind of potential situations, then you may want to add 5, 7 days. Does that make sense? Okay. Remember, I'm protecting the buyer and I'm protecting the buyer's deposit. It's very important for me as an agent to try to hit all deadlines as contract. I don't ever want to be behind on any stage. I want to be ahead of the curve. I want to be proactive against any type of situational hurdle or obstacles that we have to overcome. As a buyer's agent, the deposit typically to show good faith would be up to around 3% of the sales price. And that's based on the liquidated damages clause, that the maximum a buyer has at risk would be 3% of the sales price at the deposit if there's a breach of contract or failure to perform after the close of escrow. So to show good faith and strength, you would put up to 3%. But can you put 1%? Yes, you can open escrow with 1%. This is a negotiable term, and you don't necessarily have to have a large deposit. It is any consideration. You can have an agreement of $1 as your initial deposit. But I just tell you that if you put $1 or $100, there's not much good faith. So there's a balance that you should try to put together. This is a very important. I always underline shall deliver the deposit directly to escrow for buyer's agents. I don't want buyer's agents to take a copy of it, take a check, and then be the middleman delivering the check to escrow. And there's two reasons for that. One is the primary reason is that when you take a copy or you take possession of a check, that is now considered trust funds. And as a company, I don't want to have to record trust funds in our company log, because I have to do a lot more steps as a broker to track the status of the payment. Instead, the second reason why I don't like to do it is because liability purposes, DRE requires me to take a copy. I have to ask you, when did you receive it and when did you send it out? And it's very troublesome and burdensome to the company, and much safer and easier for the client to just go ahead and wire or send a check to escrow directly. That is very compliant from the DRE, that's why it's written by default this way, so that way we don't ever have to touch the money. The CAR agrees with this broker opinion of mine. Don't even hold trust funds. It's not worthwhile. Okay, and normally you would put the loan amount right here. And in this case, we were buying $1 million home with 80% loan to value, 20% down. And you would go ahead and write a cap of your financing terms in the event that the financing is very expensive to my buyer, where they have to pay more than 5% interest rate and more than 2%. This is written a couple of years ago. So to me, this year, I would probably put it at 4% cap or 4.5. Anyway, I want to put a cap in there because if my client doesn't get financing that is reasonable, I have the ability to cancel the transaction. So that's why you want to put these maximum caps here in place to protect your buyer in the event that they wish to cancel because they're not happy with the loan. For example, you might get a lender, and if you leave this area blank and the lender says, yeah, you're approved for the loan, but I'm going to charge you 3% points and I'm going to charge you 8% interest, you're approved. If you left this blank, your loan is approved. That means you have to fulfill and honor the agreement, and you remove your contingencies, you're going to have to close. However, if you did not get the rate and terms that you wanted, now that this is so expensive, obviously this does not make it attractive for you as a buyer. You have the ability to cancel because it has not met the financing caps that you put in place. So that is why you insert this section here, and it will change every quarter or every half a year. The interest rates change. So I would probably put in today's rates, because I know that financing for a decent qualified buyer should be 3% for a 30-year loan. I'll put a cap of maybe 4%, and points 2% is fine. Okay, that's the maximum I would want to make sure I can escape out of. Any questions on that? Now, I do put additional financing terms here. Like, I like to highlight what type of program I'm doing, because especially if my buyer is a high down payment person, like 40% down, then I declare that I'm trying to do conventional financing and the type of down payment or less as required by lender. There are times when my buyer may say, well, hey, this lender can give me a conventional loan with 10% down payment. I'd rather save and keep the extra 10% as, for example, purchasing furniture, remodeling, upgrades, replace the flooring and paint. I want to have some cash available. So that this clause right here declares that I'm 20% down. I show proof of funds with 20% down, but it also gives me the ability to put less as long as it's required by lender. And let's say the lender says 10% down will be fine. Then I can put down 10% down, and the buyer doesn't have to ask for an addendum later on to change the financing to a lower down payment. So it's already covered in here. That's why I write it this way. Just giving you the reasoning why I write it there. If you are writing a commercial transaction property for Coldwell Banker Dynasty, we have a separate division called CBD Investment Inc. This is our company whenever you do commercial deals. So you would change your zip forms before you even start your transaction down here. Make sure it says CBD Investment here for commercial deals. And you are also going to write CBD Investment here as the brokerage. Okay, just a quick reminder. A lot of you guys already know this. As a good buyer's agent, you do want to write the proof of funds and the verification. We call this POF, proof of funds. So you want to deliver that you have enough 20% down payment that I'm declaring. So I attach 1 or 2 bank statements that shows that I have the capital available. You could use stocks and mutual funds and other assets as your down payment closing proof of funds. As long as it's anything that's liquid, it should be okay. The default language for the appraisal contingency is 17 days. The loan, however, is 21 days down here, okay, by default. I usually always just leave it alone unless I have a specific client that may need less time or more time. Some clients want to be very aggressive in their offers because today there's a lot of multiple offers. So maybe if I'm a very confident buyer, I might even just waive the appraisal contingency. I don't care what it appraises for. I want to close this transaction and I will waive it. That I would check this box right here. That's when I want to be aggressive and compete against multiple offers. If I'm representing a buyer who wants to shorten their loan contingency, can you? You could. I don't suggest it because a lot of lenders take the full 21 days right now. And but some buyers are very confident in their qualifications. They have very strong balances and they have high reserves, high credit rating, and a strong relationship with their bank, they may be able to waive the loan contingency or remove or reduce the timing because maybe, for example, they sent all their documents and they get their loan desktop underwriter approved. So that means they send everything in and qualify themselves from the get-go, from the beginning. So if you have a DU approval, maybe you can waive your loan contingency or reduce the timing. But as a broker, I don't like it. I don't like you putting yourself in a tough position to perform when it's something that's out of your control. You, as a buyer's agent, don't have any control over the financing and his qualifications. The buyer himself does not have any control over the underwriter, the programs, and the lenders being able to fulfill the loan. So because the buyer yourself don't have control, it's all in the lender and the underwriter's hands. I don't like to put a time frame ticking against me when I don't have control. But when I do have control, I give my paperwork up front, I'm DU approved, then maybe I have some leverage and confidence that I will get my financing that I want. It all depends. Every client has a different unique situation, and every client has different circumstances, different other properties, and other investments, other businesses, types of sourcing of income, and they also have different types of tax returns where they may or may not be reporting all their income. And every property itself could create some issues, even if your buyer is perfect. The property might not qualify for a loan. Does that make sense? If you have questions, please let me know. Okay. So this page here is important because this is several areas where you get to add language and check boxes where this is kind of where you're negotiating the terms of the sale. This box here is when your buyer is trying to sell their property in order to buy this property. So you would check this box. It's very common where a buyer is looking to purchase your home. However, they have to subject to the sale of an existing property, and we have to find out whether that other property is on the market and whether or not it's already in escrow. If it's already in escrow, that might be good. That shows that it's a very committed and strong buyer, and they're already actively looking for a replacement property. And I want to know what stage they are at in their escrow, because if they are past the contingency removal of their buyer, this is a slam dunk. They're very, very likely to move forward. But if they are in the beginning stages of their escrow, if their buyer cancels on their property, then they're going to cancel on your property, very likely. So everything is dependent upon timing, okay? And we check certain boxes here, like if you were to add an addendum to the transaction, maybe in your counteroffer, or you want to write a lot of stuff on the terms of your transaction, you can. Go ahead. If these 4 lines are not enough for you to write your language, then go ahead and attach an addendum. And then you can write the rest, like 10 different terms that you want. But otherwise, if you could write everything in here, it's better to just go ahead and fit it all into the contract. Don't add all these unnecessary pages. So typically you would always write any special terms or disclosures or requirements of the sale. So this is where I would write, and this is the broker strategy. So it's good that you're paying attention right now. This is where I write disclosure stuff, like if I'm related to the buyer as the agent, or if I have an interest representing, maybe I'm buying it as a company. So I have an interest as a buyer. DRE, California, we have requirements to disclose these things as realtors. But I want to write other special terms. And everything is situational to the type of property we're purchasing. If we're buying a standard single family house, then I'm going to go ahead and write a few terms in here that I might want. For example, I might say stuff like, maybe I haven't seen the inside yet because it's tenant occupied. I might write a various subject to types of clauses in here, like subject to interior inspection. Okay, that means what that means, subject to means it's a condition of sale. So when I write subject to, is a condition of sale is I get to inspect the property in the inside. That's very common nowadays because some people are putting together and writing offers without looking at the inside because the seller does or the tenant doesn't want to provide access. If they never give me access, then that means I never have to remove my contingency because I put subject to interior inspection. If you don't let me access, I can't do my due diligence. Simple as that. So that's one of the things I would do to protect a buyer. If this is a HOA, I would maybe write subject to review of CCNR's HOA financial health and receipt of all HOA docs within 10 days of after acceptance. And if they don't deliver to me late or whatnot, then I have myself extensions to the transaction. I might write other special terms in here, such as maybe I want to negotiate certain types of repairs or condition things that I want the seller to perform on. Maybe I want certain documents to be provided, like seller to provide me a copy of the plans and approvals of the recent or permits of the recent upgrades or square footage increases. Maybe I want to ask for reports. Some reports would be maybe like seller to deliver a copy of the rental agreement, seller to deliver me a copy of the insurance claim that they had a water flood that was already disclosed and you found out. So I want a copy of what was the work done. You know, you can add any specific types of reports. I can asked for a copy of the solar bill because this property has a solar lease, and I want to get the review this ASAP. You know, everything is situational, so that's where you write in special terms in here. I covered a lot, and I didn't cover it because there's a million different types of terms. But is there any questions about structuring your deals? Any questions? Well, if you're dealing with a specific type of sale, this is where you get to add certain advisories that are already pre-written for the type of sale by CAR attorneys. So if you're dealing with a probate, check this box, add that form. If you're dealing with a trust sale, any type of trust, living trust, living trust, irrevocable trust, revocable trust, add this form. If you're dealing with a short sale, add these two forms, short sale addendum and a short sale information and advisory. If you're dealing with an REO, which is a foreclosed home, then go ahead and add this REO advisory for your buyer to sign. There's nothing to fill out, just needs you to get these attached so the buyer can read the language that will help protect you as an agent to let them know what they should be aware of when buying these types of property. Okay? And other, if I want to check this box, I could add any other forms in here as a part, make this how I make part of the transaction. Okay? So if you have a special circumstance, you should check other boxes in there. When I get to the allocation of costs, this is where we can easily negotiate and slide in certain expenses to and assign who's going to pay for what. In real estate, in negotiations, everything is negotiable typically. So this is where you could try to benefit your buyer or structure it how you want to. So when I represent a buyer, I'll use, it's customary that a seller will pay for the NHD disclosure report, and you would check the box environmental, and it also includes a tax report so the buyer can understand how much not only is the property tax, but whether or not there's any supplemental, Mello-Roos special assessment taxes against the property, certain local or city or county added taxes. So go ahead and let the seller choose and pay for the NHD disclosure report. I check it like this. And this is my guidance when you're representing a buyer. I also like to ask for the seller to pay for the inspection termite report and the section 1 clearance, because as a buyer, it's nice to have a clearance report of termite and pests when I buy the house. It's wouldn't want it to? Now, in certain circumstances, I may let it go. If it's a newer building, like for right now, is if it's whether 2018, 19, or 20 built, the termite report and clearance is not very important to me if it's a newer construction. The other reasons why is maybe I'm writing a very low offer, and I think I'm writing a lowball offer. Then I may not ask for the termites because I'm happy with getting the property at my price. So that's one area where I would not ask for it. If the property is a condominium, and depending on the HOA, CCNRs, most of the HOA and CCNRs will cover the termite for the exterior of the building. What they don't include is the interior. So maybe I will ask, if it's a condo townhouse, I'll ask for the interior termite report and section 1 clearance. The one thing for if I'm representing a seller is when it talks about termite and wood destroying pests. If I'm a seller signing this contract and the buyer says seller to pay for the report and clearance, if you're a listing agent and you get your seller to agree to this clause, you have basically told or have your seller agree to a cost and expense that we have no idea what it's going to be. And so if the termite report comes back and it needs a lot of woodwork and it needs a fumigation, you could be looking, and the balcony needs to be replaced, and the patio might be falling down and needs to be replaced, the entire wood for the covered patio, you might be looking at $6,000, $9,000, $10,000 worth of repairs. And that's on the high side, but I'm just telling you, you are writing a blank check for the seller when you agree to this clause. So as a buyer's agent, I love it because I put in the seller to obligate them to get the clearance. But as a seller's agent, I don't like to write a blank check. So usually what I would do is I write a counter offer. If the buyer writes this term to me, as a listing agent, I will counter them. Seller will be responsible and agrees to termite section 1 clearance up to a maximum of $1,800, $2,000, whatever I believe is reasonable for this property and its condition. So I could put a cap maximum of expense my seller is responsible for, and it protects my seller. Correct? That's one strategy if I'm a listing agent. Another strategy is don't write a blank check. Don't write it up to a maximum. You could always just go ahead and get a termite report done before you open escrow. So you can get a free termite inspection, get a copy of a termite from any reputable termite company, and then you already know how much the section 1 clearance is, and you can negotiate with more understanding of what you expect. So those are my 2 recommendations for you when you represent a seller. But too many listing agents are signing off and agreeing to this clause, not knowing what the expense is going to be. And that's where I have precautions or concerns when you're a listing agent. Okay? Does that make sense? It's very customary on item 3 over here that the buyer pays for their own home inspection and any other inspectors that they want to bring in to do their due diligence. So typically the home inspection is a general home inspection, and they check the foundation, the structure, the roof. They check a lot of different areas. However, they do a general inspection. Remember, they will identify potential issues, and then they're going to say, please consult with a roofer, a structural engineer, a plumber, electrician, a contractor, they're going to refer to other professionals when they see something that may need some repair or corrections. So just because you do the home inspection doesn't mean your job is done. As a buyer's agent, you may have to guide the client. Hey, I think it's a good idea. This report says you should also get an electrician here and a roofer here. Do you want to get this inspectors to take a look at the condition to make sure you're happy with the condition? And they can say yes or no. Most of the times the buyers say no because they don't want to pay these extra fees. So when they decline to follow your guidance to get other inspectors like a HVAC air conditioning person, and they decline to do it, then you should ask them to sign off on the buyer inspection election form. The BIE form, I'll bring it up for you too, is a very strong form to use in your transactions to protect you as a buyer, as an agent. Because anytime there's a recommendation and they decline it, you want to document this in your transaction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the form to show you what it looks like, because I think it's worth spending some time to look at this form. Any questions so far? You guys all asleep? No, you guys are quiet.
No, we're good. We're listening.
Okay, Adam, does everything I say make sense?
Yep,
Are you doing what I'm suggesting?
exactly.
Have you ever used a buyer inspection election form before?
Yes.
Perfect. I love it. So you know exactly what I'm
Uh,
talking about.
yep, especially
And
know you present a buyer.
yes, it is, and a listing agent. Whether I don't care what side of the form or which side you're on, using the BIE, and this is from the legal attorneys from CAR. Gov Hutchinson told us when you are prepared and you have a buyer inspection election where the buyer declined those additional reports, you they have a very weak complaint or argument against you when they discover something later on and it becomes a problem. It's very common, for example, when it recommends a mold inspector or a plumber to check for a leak, and they later on 2 years later they complain about mold and they complain about this and this, and when they have the BIE that they failed or refused to go with your advice, they don't have any attorney will drop their case against you because it's their lack of due diligence. Okay, so I'm going to show this screen share of what I'm pulling up right now. This is the BIE form. You guys see it right in front of you, right? And it tells the buyer, look, it's only a one-page document, so it's very simple to throw in your contract. Broker advice. You are strongly advised to investigate the condition and suitability of all aspects of the property. If you are not doing so, you are acting against the advice of brokers. So buyer's right and duties. You have the affirmative duty to exercise reasonable care to protect yourself, including discovery and doing your due diligence, disclose facts and investigate other information to make sure you're happy with the transaction. So when you do the home inspection, there is an area here where the home inspector will say, oh, there could be a little bit of dark stains over here in the bathroom. I suggest you get a mold inspector to come out, okay? And then they're gonna say, oh, there's electrical wiring issues. This does not appear to be grounded. You know, you should get an electrician out here, okay, blah, blah, blah. There might be some structural damages to, maybe it's not retrofitted for earthquake yet. They might tell you to get a foundation expert here. Maybe you have a situation where the seller discloses that maybe the seller discloses there's an unpermitted area added, or if there's a discrepancy in the profile report and the square footage that's being reported. If any, then you would check this box that they should investigate with the city and pull permits. So I want you to understand that this form is that you making these recommendations. Go off of the inspection report that your buyer just paid for, and check the boxes that you suggest that the report suggests. Okay, it's a one extra step, but you are liability very clean and clear of most liability when you have this form in your transaction as a buyer's agent or a seller's agent. Okay, I like it for all files. Any questions on the BIE? Okay, then I'm going to go back to the purchase contract. Okay, so we finished the home inspection part, and I'm going to move down on the transaction. This area here is where I write a couple of items, if in particular based upon the area. Certain cities and counties have compliance requirements for what's called a code. Code compliance for a property could easily just involve, for example, carbon monoxide and smoke detectors, and the water heater being braced, strapped by dual straps to to the studs on the wall. So this is easily a seller requirement because the appraiser requires this stuff too. So I asked the seller to pay. And I also asked for this, sometimes in certain cities, like I talked to you about Pasadena, Azusa, El Monte, they may have minimum city government reports and requirements to close. And I asked for the seller to get those completed as a cost of compliance. And I asked for that in those cities here. Okay. And retrofit standards. For example, the city of Los Angeles has retrofit standard requirements. It's called the City of LA 9A report. And if I'm dealing with a property in, let's say, I don't know, Highland Park or in Wilshire area, they have a requirement of retrofit, and these are to be installed on the property today. So even though there's a self-certification process where the seller can do stuff online and get the report done, the requirement by code is that the property has obviously the carbon monoxide smoke detector or water heater strap bracing. But in addition to that, they also ask for low flow water conserving devices installed, plumbing fixtures. So that is something like low flow toilets, low flow faucets, and the shower head has to be water conserving devices. Okay, and those are all rated by how many gallons per second or minute that they send out. The other requirements is retrofit is certain types of foundational structural support for earthquake safety. So if you're dealing with a property in a raised foundation, then, and there's a crawl space beneath, it may ask for you to have certain retrofit anchors and bolts to support the beams under the property in the crawl space. So these are called retrofit requirements, and I want you to be aware of it because when you're dealing with this problem, you want to already have it negotiated that the seller should be paying for these retrofit safety requirements. Any questions on this one? If I'm a listing agent, I like to cancel and delete these two items here. I don't like to make my seller to be responsible for repairs and items that they have no idea what the expense is. So because of that, I rather renegotiate this, and I would maybe counter them retrofit requirements to be negotiated after a report has been completed. Okay, or I would say delete item 7B2 completely. So I would take these items out of the contract. I don't want to commit my seller to expenses that we have no idea. It's like writing a blank check. Okay. There has been some times I've had a situation where the city retrofit requirement asked them to replace the entire balcony and to improve the entire foundation, and the structure needed to be braced and anchored and bolted. And that was a $45,000 expense that the seller had committed to by checking that box and agreeing to it. And the seller is not going to be happy when you tell them that they have to do it. So if you're a listing agent, protect your client and don't commit them or allow them to be in a situation that they're committed to an expense of not knowing what it's going to be. I would rather have you hold off on any negotiations, go get or grab a report or bring a professional in to let you know what these costs expense is going to be before making a commitment or signing an agreement on the contract. That's the better step to take. Yes, it's extra homework, but it helps you shine and have a smooth transaction versus a complaint when the seller says, "What are you telling me? I can't pay $45,000 for my retrofit and for a new balcony." Okay, so just be cautious when you're dealing with these sales. I love it when you guys use a very great escrow officer like Perfect Escrow and Connie Fung. I love you can support her and her company because she does excellent work. I've done hundreds of transactions with her, and I know and have my full confidence when you deal with her, you're going to have smoother transactions because ultimately what you want is someone who's going to be on top of things, communicate, has the experience, and has good client management. She has systems in place to communicate weekly, get things resolved early, and she also has the experience to satisfy and do everything in compliance and communicate with the lenders. And not only that, she speaks 4 languages. So she's super helpful to a vast variety of needs. So each party pays their own fees is what I like to write when I negotiate escrow fees. The only time I really ask for the seller to pay for all fees is when I'm dealing with maybe a veteran who's doing a VA loan. Maybe I'm dealing with an FHA borrower and funds are very limited, but I'm giving them a great price. Then I'll have the seller pay for the fees. So here's some tips. It's customary for the seller to pay and deliver the buyer a clear title insurance policy. And I like the Alta report is the stronger report. And usually I just give it seller's choice, but it's okay to write your preferred title rep if you like to. Okay, I have no vested interest in any title companies or reps, but I do have an open door policy, and I allow agents to select who they like to use. I'm not a very directing or controlling broker. I believe you can use the people you love to use and support. It's any cost for the title insurance policy that is required for the buyer's lender, that is a buyer expense. Please explain this to your borrowers that even though the seller is paying for the title insurance policy, there still will be an expense for the buyer on title when their lender has an extra added insurance in there. And it happened, it's 100% of transactions. The lender is going to have an additional endorsement policy. Okay, so if you have a cash transaction, there's no additional expense. When you have a certain city, they may have a transfer tax, or certain counties have a transfer tax associated with the sale. I ask for the seller to pay for that. That is very customary. And it's only if it's applicable. So I want you to understand that, if there's no expense, then there's no harm. But as a buyer's rep, I like to put and negotiate this up front. If I'm dealing with the property with the HOA, go ahead and check all of these boxes and ask them to pay for paragraph 3, 4, and 5. These are, suggested for you as a buyer's rep. However, this is the argumenting point is number 5 here. I do believe the seller should pay for the HOA transfer fee and the preparation of documents that are by 4525 California Civil Code. But it is, to me, very fair that the ones other than those required by Civil Code 4525, the buyer should pay for that. Okay, but I try to throw it in and have the seller pay for it. But I believe the buyer should be paying for the ones other than Civil Code 4525. If you want to know what that is usually what is called the HOA certification questionnaire. And the lender has a list of questions like, what is the property reserves for the HOA? Anybody is outstanding? Any litigation or claims against the property or the community? How many is the tenant to owner ratio? And they ask a bunch of different questions. Any insurance claims against the property? And these questionnaires is other than 4525. It's the lender doing their own due diligence, and that's a buyer fee that I believe should be paid by the buyer if they're having financing for a condominium. But I try to slide it in for the seller to pay. But just giving you my 2 cents. Does that make sense? Okay. No questions? I'll move on. Based on the size of the property and the condition and the age of the systems, I would ask the seller to pay and deliver and provide a home warranty up to 500, 600, 700. You can get the estimated amount from any of your favorite home warranty representatives, and they can tell you a quote. I like to ask for the upgraded plan, and I say buyer's choice of options and upgrades. Okay, so if you have an older roof, maybe you ask for the roof coverage. If you have a pool, check the box. Go ahead and ask for the additional home warranty. It's a good coverage. I like you as a broker having home warranty because it's an extra layer of protection and solutions in the event something goes wrong in their first year of moving in. Those are most likely when you have the most problems because that they're starting to learn about the property and its condition. Okay. If your buyer is writing a lowball offer and they don't care about the home warranty, they're going to remodel the whole thing, and have them check this box that they are waiving the home warranty request. Notice here under fixtures included and excluded. If you want the stove, check the box. If you want the refrigerator, I'll check the box. If you want the washer and dryer, just the same. Don't leave this blank and expect them to give you all these appliances. You cannot, this is a negotiable term because you want to make sure you're just filling it out properly. Anything as a fixture, like anything attached to the property, typically will be considered a fixture. So those are all included with the sale, and that includes things like the water softener, water purifier, you know, all the ceiling fans and you know, stuff like that. You want to have them and have a discussion. Is there anything that you want to make sure is included with the sale, like chandelier, okay, or the drapes and custom drapery, or stuff like that? But if you don't want, or you want to include additional furniture, you could write them in right here. Item number 3. Like, I want the patio furniture. I would like the request for additional items like the bedroom, not the bedroom, the dining room table and the set and 4 chairs. Whatever you want, you could put additional items to be included here. So the other thing that's very, very important and have a conversation on is liened or leased items. The most common today is solar systems, solar panels. And they put together a lease of 20 to 30 years, and it takes a monthly payment to pay off the solar lease. And you need to be able to review those documents and what kind of warranty, what kind of lease payments, and whether or not they own the solar after 20 years or not. So you want to be able to review this document and understand it or you can ask them to pay it off. That's something that I would write in my contract if I'm representing a buyer. I don't want to obligate my client to a lease. I try to have the seller pay it off if possible. If there's certain things that are excluded, then that's where it should be written here. If the seller or listing agent already writes in certain things to be excluded, like the family heirloom chandelier, or they want to exclude a specific statue in the front, or anything that is specific, they'll let you know in the MLS. Then you go ahead and fill it out right here. Okay. Any brackets such as the TV brackets, they are supposed to remain with the property, and the TV gets to go because TV is personal property. The bracket is a fixture. Okay, that's just one clarification. This box is important regarding to intending or not intending to occupy as your residence. If the buyer is intending, leave it blank to leave as a residence. If they do not intend to occupy, what does this mean? This means that the buyer is going to use this as a rental property or income property, and therefore the lender is going to give them a higher interest rate as a investment property. Okay, just letting you know the differences. By default, it says the possession of the property will be delivered to buyer vacant at the close of escrow, and you have the options where the seller may stay behind. Then you would use either SIP if it's less than 30 days, or if they're going to stay behind for longer than the month, you would use form RLAS. Check the box for the situation that is you're dealing with. Any questions? Now, the problem that I've seen in today's deals is when there's tenant occupied property. Tenant occupied property is when the seller is going to deliver the property with the existing tenant in place. You should give them a copy of the lease agreement. The buyer needs to be aware of various rent control or other laws of the area, and they are going to assume the tenant there. Use this checkbox and use form TIP to structure how much is the security deposit, how much, when does their lease expire, and understanding who pays for the utilities and what expenses. This is a great form and to get the client to understand what's the situation with this property and its possession. Okay. And by default, this is important because certain disclosures are required. It says in here, every agent has a requirement to do AVID form. Nothing relieves a buyer, broker, or seller broker to complete their own reasonably competent visual inspection of the property and disclose areas of material facts affecting the value or desirability of the property. So this is your opportunity to reveal, disclose, and protect yourself and the company, and let your buyer know of any defects. Okay. It also asks for the SPQ and the TDS and other requirements of California properties that we already know. I'm not going to go through all these other languages because you can read that on your own. It's not very detailed, but I want to remind you that the property of the condition is sold as is in its present condition as of the date that you were accepted in contract. So it's repetitive to always write as is, because it's already in there. But this is the area where you should read that the seller has a requirement to disclose any known material facts and defects, any insurance claims within the past 5 years, any repairs that they've done. They have to be honest on their TDS and the SPQ disclosures. Okay. If the seller is dishonest, they are liable to be sued in the future. Okay, so I don't want you to be in a situation of a seller who doesn't care or about, or lies or tries to hide something. You can sleep better at night when you know that you sold a transaction telling the truth. Okay.
Kevin,
Yes.
Kevin, this is Jean. Yeah, so you say regarding this disclosure for the defect, and it liable for how many years? 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years?
Forever.
Forever?
Forever.
Oh, wow. So like I have experience for other property. Some other agent help the uh, my buyer to buy the house. So on the disclosure, they say, oh, all the copper plumbing is new. But after they bought it like 3, 4 years, and then find out the leaking is from the dining area.
Yep.
So when the worker come over and check it out, the
It says
plumbing
partially
still
copper.
old.
It's still galvanized on that area.
Yeah, yeah.
They did a partial copper upgrade, not a full copper upgrade. And when you
No,
have
but
galvanized copper,
on the disclosure, the agent show it to my client, like the previous listing agent show it to my client, is completely all house is new.
okay. So here's what I'm gonna share this with you because it's important to understand.
Mm-hmm.
This is a situation of you test 3, 5, 7 years. Okay, here's California statutory law on the courts. You have 3 years liability for technically for 3 years as liability from the sale date. Okay. However, if you have fraud, statute of limitation is 3 years. But if you have fraud named in the complaint, then you have at least 7 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
question becomes in terms of courts and legal proceedings, it's 3 years statute of limitations from date of discovery. And so if you discover this 4 years from the transaction closing date, then they have additional 3 years of discovery to file a lawsuit. So your client technically has, from that date that they discovered this issue, they have 3 years to go after the seller for this, hire an attorney and complain. So I'll tell you one other thing. There was a situation that I know of. An agent sold a property in 2008. Okay? And there was a disclosed, or it was advertised, legal guest house, completely legal guest house. And then in 2018, the city said, owner, your property has an unpermitted area. We are asking you to tear down your guest house. It is illegally constructed, no permit. The owner tore it down, followed the compliance to the city request, and then they sued the agent and the company for that for the guest house, and they are claiming it's 3 years within of discovery. Okay, so luckily this is not my company being involved, but because they just discovered it in 2018, they technically have 3 years statute of limitations to go after the seller and the agent from 2018. That's 11 years from the sale, because we're in 2020 right now. So that's why I'm kind of telling you forever, because they could discover something later on, and if they have a really good attorney, they can prove that the discovery happened, currently.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, that's a great question. Read this entire paragraph 12, that it is the buyer's responsibility to, at buyer's expense, to do the due diligence and conduct all the reports and investigations of the property. And the seller has to make it available during the entire 17 days of the buyer's due diligence. They have to have the water, gas, electricity, and all operable utilities on during the due diligence period. Okay? And, we are not tax consultants. So, you have the client decide how they want to hold the vesting of the title. and time periods here. Buyer has 17 days to do all the due diligence. You can change the dates. You can ask the buyer could investigate and find and ask for repairs. Yeah, it's allowed to ask for repairs. But the seller has no obligation to agree or even to respond to the to the buyer request for repairs. It's in the contract. The seller has no obligation to respond. Okay? So if any reports is not delivered to a buyer in the sale, that's important, like the termite report, NHD report, HOA report of the CCNRs, or any solar lease agreement or any lease agreement of the tenants, any report, disclosure, or information that's missing from the file or with the seller is responsible per contract. Then the buyer has 5 additional days after it's finally delivered to review any late delivery of documentation. Okay? And this also says that the buyer's removal of contingencies must be done in writing. So you have any contingencies that you have in place, they continue to extend as long as you don't remove them in writing. Okay? There's only 2 reasons that a seller has to cancel the transaction. The seller has the ability to cancel for 1, the buyer doesn't remove the contingencies on time. Okay, and you give them a notice to perform to act within 2 days. The other reason is that the seller the right to cancel is if the buyer doesn't do any contracted requirement and they do a breach of contract by not fulfilling any other contractual requirement. One of them is like they have to deliver the deposit within 3 business days. One of them is they have to remove all contingencies. I don't know. Another contract requirement is, signing all the disclosures and documents back and returning back by the due diligence period. Stuff like that. So send a notice to perform first before you cancel any party out. We're running out of time now, but I have really covered all the major areas. Is there any questions about the contract that you want me to answer any questions up?
You can save for next time in 2 parts. Today 1 part, next time the second part. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to write one thing about brokers' scope of duty, and that brokers, it also means you as the agent have your scope of what you're supposed to be doing. The buyer and seller agree that broker and agent do not decide what price the buyer or seller should pay. They do not guarantee any condition of property or performance or completion of various service providers in the transaction. We do not have an obligation to do any areas off site of the property or the common areas like the elevators and the walkways and steps of a condominium. We do not have to identify defects that are not observable, like in the attic or in the basement. We do not have to be responsible for boundary lines or clouded title areas. We're not responsible for verifying the square footage or representing any information that is provided from any other reports, the MLS, advertisements, or flyers. So we're not responsible for that. Seller does not set the fair market value. It's really whatever the parties agree to is the fair market value in the counter offers and negotiations. And we do not provide any legal or tax advice. We should not be relied on. They should seek their own legal, tax, insurance, title, and other desired assistance from the appropriate professionals. Remind them of this, okay? Have them underline this and highlight this. It's very important. I'm giving you all the areas that the buyer should know, okay? So at this time, I'm gonna conclude today. We covered a lot of the purchase contract. This is the page regarding liquidated damages and arbitration. It's worthwhile to read. It's not a requirement to initial. It's optional as a brokerage. And that's it. I'll take any questions. If not, please let me know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, if you have any,
Kevin, thank you very much. Very good.
yeah, I appreciate you guys being on the call.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the only thing I just tell you is there's one form I want to talk about. It's called the coronavirus addendum, CVA.
Okay.
CVA is an addendum that says, that protects a buyer. It says, in the event that I or my family members contract the coronavirus and test positive, I have the ability to extend either the contingencies or the close of escrow date or both if we become negatively impacted by COVID. So it's giving them an extra extension. It also says if I lose my job or loss of employment or hours or my financing does not work out due to COVID related reasons, I have the ability to extend or cancel the transaction. So if I'm a buyer's agent, it's nice to have to upfront to be signed in your offer and include it, but it also adds a fourth contingency to your transaction, which will make your transaction relatively weaker compared to another buyer if you're in a very competitive area who may not be asking for these free extensions. Okay, so give and take. It depends on your situation of how competitive you are, but it's nice to have if you're a buyer agent to protect them, but maybe they're over protecting them too. If I'm a listing agent, I don't like to sign off on the COVID CVA. So if you're a listing agent, I don't want to have to give these free extensions to the buyer because I don't know whether or not them or a family member gets COVID. They can be just using this to really just waste time. So it's negotiable, but I'm just letting you know the CVA form, coronavirus addendum, be cautious how it's written or reduce the timing if you're going to use it. Okay?
Thank you. Very good. Appreciate that.
Thank you guys. You guys have a great week. I'll see you at tomorrow's sales meeting at 10 a.m. And again, if you have any specific questions or needs, just contact or reach me by text or cell phone anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Have a great week.
You too, buddy.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.